Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep on something pretty fascinating and maybe a little unnerving too. It's the connection between UFO sightings and nuclear sites. We've got a really interesting mix of stuff to look at this time around. YouTube videos, declassified documents, firsthand accounts. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, and I think what we're going to try to do is sift through all this, try to understand, why UFOs seem so drawn to anything nuclear. And this isn't a new thing either. It's a pattern researchers have been documenting for decades now, stretching all the way back to the, beginning of the atomic age.
Okay, so let's start with something recent, like those drone sightings over New Jersey back in November 2024. Specifically, the ones near that Duke Energy nuclear plant in Southport, North Carolina. What makes people so skeptical of the official drone explanation?
I think it boils down to a lack of trust. People look at the footage, the way these things are moving, and they just don't buy it. There's this sense that something bigger is going on and the government isn't being straight with us. But, to really understand that skepticism, you have to go back and look at the history of UFO sightings around nuclear sites. It's a long and complex history, and one of the key figures in all this is a researcher named Robert Hastings.
His book, UFOs and Nukes, that's kind of like the Bible on this topic, right?
Absolutely. Hastings spent years meticulously documenting cases, interviewing over 167 military personnel who had firsthand experience with these events. And, a lot of these witnesses had top-secret clearances, so their testimony carries a lot of weight.
So Hastings is saying these incidents, they're not just random events. There's a real pattern here.
Exactly. And what's really remarkable is how far back this pattern goes. Almost as soon as humanity entered the nuclear age, with the first atomic bomb detonations in 1945, the UFO activity around nuclear sites just spiked dramatically.
Hold on, so you're talking sightings even before Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Even before. There were documented sightings at the Hanford plutonium production site in Washington state. This was just months after the Trinity test in New Mexico. And these early sightings coincide with a whole wave of these mysterious green fireball sightings across the U.S.
Green fireballs. Okay, you got to tell me more about that.
They weren't your typical meteors, that's for sure. They moved erratically, sometimes changing direction in mid-flight. They made no sound, and they left no debris. Some researchers think they might have been some kind of advanced propulsion system, possibly even connected to the nuclear tests themselves.
So you're saying there's a potential link between these green fireballs and UFO activity, like the nuclear tests somehow attracted or influenced these objects?
It's a theory, and a compelling one. It suggests that whatever these UFOs are, they're sensitive to the energies released by nuclear detonations.
And this wasn't just happening in the U.S., right? This was a global phenomenon.
Absolutely. We see a similar pattern of UFO activity around nuclear sites all over the world. Take the 1980 Bentwaters incident in the UK, for example. This happened at RAF Woodbridge, which housed the largest stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons in Western Europe at the time.
What exactly happened there?
Well, multiple military personnel witnessed strange lights in the forest surrounding the base. Some even described a craft landing and interacting with the security fence near where nuclear weapons were stored. The incident remains unexplained to this day.
That's pretty chilling. Are there any other international incidents that stand out?
Definitely. In 1982, at a Ukrainian missile base, multiple missiles mysteriously went into countdown mode while this massive disc-shaped UFO was seen hovering overhead. Again, no explanation was ever given.
It's like someone or something was trying to send us a message.
That's what a lot of researchers believe. The question is, what is that message? And maybe even more importantly, are we listening?
Okay, so we've got a lot of history here, a pattern that's been building for decades. But let's get into some specifics. What are some of the most compelling cases that involve direct interaction between UFOs and nuclear weapon systems? Cases where it seems like these objects weren't just observing, they were interfering.
One of the most well-documented incidents occurred in 1964 at Vandenberg Air Force Base. Lieutenant Bob Jacobs, a photo instrumentation specialist, was filming a test launch of a dummy nuclear warhead. And something extraordinary happened.
What did he see?
On film, a disc-shaped object appears in the frame. It chases the dummy warhead and fires these beams of light at it. The object then maneuvers around the warhead and appears to disable it before disappearing.
Wait, this was all caught on film. What happened to the footage?
Jacobs was immediately debriefed by men claiming to be from the CIA. His film was confiscated, and they threatened him, told him to never speak of the incident. All records of him ever being stationed at Vandenberg were erased, and later on, his mailbox was mysteriously blown up.
That's straight out of a spy thriller. So we have a witness with top secret clearance Physical evidence in the form of film and then a cover-up. That's pretty compelling.
It is, and there are other cases just like it. In 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base, 10 ICBMs simultaneously went offline, while a red, glowing object was observed hovering over the base.
10 nuclear missiles simultaneously disabled. That sounds like a major security breach.
It was, and it caused a complete shutdown of the base. Multiple witnesses, including Robert Salas, who was the launch control officer on duty that night, have corroborated this event. They insist it wasn't a drill, and there was no logical explanation for the malfunction.
This is getting really unsettling. It's like someone or something has the ability to just switch off our nuclear weapons at will.
And that's not all. In 1966, at Muno Air Force Base, a UFO actually triggered a launch sequence for a nuclear missile.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
They could have launched a nuclear weapon.
It was a very real possibility. Thankfully, Captain David Schindel, who was on duty, managed to manually override the launch and prevent a potential catastrophe.
This is terrifying.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're talking about more than just observation. We're talking about potential control over our most destructive weapons.
That's the implication, and it raises some very serious questions about the true nature of this phenomenon and its intentions towards humanity. But the unsettling events don't stop there.
Oh no, there's more.
In the late 1970s, there were multiple sightings at Ellsworth Air Force Base, and one particularly disturbing incident involved a security patrol. They experienced missing time and possible abduction near a missile silo. One member of that patrol, Mario Woods, later recounted seeing a large craft and smaller beings.
Missing time. What does that even mean?
It's a common phenomenon reported in UFO encounters.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a period of time that the witness can't account for. They might have a gap in their memory, or the events of that period might seem distorted or dreamlike.
So this security patrol had an encounter with a UFO and experienced this missing time.
Yes, and it gets even stranger. Wood's partner that night, Michael Johnson, disappeared and was never found.
That's incredibly disturbing. Are there any more recent incidents like this?
There's one that stands out. In 2010, at F.E. Warren Air Force Base, a massive UFO sighting coincided with a 26-hour power outage that disabled 50 ICBMs.
50 ICBMs disabled? That's an entire wing of our nuclear arsenal. This is huge.
It was a major event, and it went all the way to the top. President Obama was briefed on the incident. The Air Force tried to downplay it, blaming a faulty circuit card. But the blackout was far too long and affected too many missiles for that to be a plausible explanation.
Okay, so we're not talking about some random isolated events here. This is a consistent pattern stretching across decades in different parts of the world. Are all these witnesses just making this stuff up?
That's a fair question, but it's important to remember who these witnesses are. We're talking about highly trained military personnel, many with top secret clearances, who have a lot to lose by speaking out.
They're risking their careers, their reputations, potentially even their safety by coming forward.
Exactly, and that's what makes their testimony so compelling. These aren't attention seekers or conspiracy theorists. These are individuals who've taken an oath to protect their country, and they're putting everything on the line to tell their stories.
So if they're telling the truth, why would the government cover this up? What are they trying to hide?
That's a question we'll explore in more depth later, but it seems there's a deliberate effort to downplay and dismiss any evidence. That suggests UFOs might pose a threat to our nuclear capabilities.
So are we talking about a full-blown conspiracy?
I think we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions, but the evidence suggests that something is definitely being hidden. And to understand the roots of this secrecy, we need to go back and look at how the government has handled the UFO phenomenon from the very beginning.
Okay, so let's dig into that. Take us back to the early days of UFO research. How did the government respond to these initial waves of sightings?
The government's response to this whole UFO thing, especially around nuclear sites, it's been complicated, kind of contradictory even. One example that really stands out is Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book? That was the Air Force's official UFO investigation, right? It went on for years, didn't it?
Yep, from 1952 to 1969. And, on the surface, it seemed like they were really trying to get to the bottom of things. But if you look closer, some things just don't add up.
Like what?
Well, for starters, who they picked to lead the whole thing, Edward Condon. This guy was a big-shot physicist, played a major role in the Manhattan Project.
Wait a minute. The guy investigating UFOs helped develop the atomic bomb?
Exactly. And before the investigation was even finished, Condon was already saying publicly that UFOs weren't worth serious study. Unsurprisingly, the final report concluded that there was nothing unusual about UFO sightings, attributing them to things like misidentified aircraft, weather, or hoaxes.
So it sounds like the investigation was biased from the get-go. But surely people must have questioned Condon's involvement given his background.
Oh, they did. Plenty of scientists and researchers criticized the Blue Book investigation. They pointed out inconsistencies in the data and a clear effort to debunk rather than genuinely investigate.
This all sounds eerily familiar. Even today, the official line on UFOs seems to be one of denial and downplaying.
Yeah, it does. And the recent ARO investigation, that's the current Pentagon UFO program, well, it seems to be following the same playbook. The focus seems to be on finding ordinary explanations, even for cases that just don't fit conventional understanding.
It's like they're determined to maintain this narrative that UFOs aren't a threat,
Yeah.
even when there's a mountain of evidence suggesting otherwise.
Right, and they pull out all the stops to enforce that narrative. Witnesses often face pressure to stay quiet. Their stories are dismissed as hallucinations or misinterpretations.
You hear stories about intimidation, threats, even career sabotage for those who speak outright.
It's a chilling reality. And this culture of secrecy, it creates a ripple effect. Others are discouraged from coming forward because they're afraid of being ridiculed or ostracized.
It's like a classic catch-22. We need more people to come forward to break through the official silence. But the fear of reprisal keeps them quiet.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this secrecy, it doesn't just affect individuals, it has bigger consequences for society. If there's something real going on here, something that might pose a threat, this lack of transparency leaves us all vulnerable.
Okay, so let's just say for a moment that there is a cover-up. What are they hiding? And why are UFOs so interested in our nukes in the first place?
Those are the million-dollar questions, the ones that keep researchers, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, up at night. There are a bunch of theories out there, each with its own set of intriguing possibilities. One of the most popular is the benevolent protector theory.
Okay, the benevolent protector theory. What's the gist of that one?
Basically, it suggests that UFOs are like guardians, you know? They're concerned about our destructive tendencies, especially with nukes. They're watching us, keeping tabs on our progress, and stepping in when they think it's necessary to prevent a disaster.
So they're not hostile. They're actually trying to help us. That's kind of reassuring in a weird way.
Yeah.
But if they're so benevolent, why all the secrecy? Why not just make contact and, guide us towards a more peaceful path?
That's the question, isn't it? And there are a few possible answers. Maybe they think direct intervention would mess with our natural development, or maybe they're waiting for us to grow up a bit, reach a certain level of maturity before they reveal themselves.
Like that saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Maybe they want us to figure things out for ourselves.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But what if they're not so altruistic? What if they have their own agenda, one that doesn't necessarily have our best interests at heart?
Okay, now we're getting into some darker territory.
This brings us to the parasitic host theory, which is a bit more unsettling. This theory says that UFOs might be protecting their own interests, maybe related to resources they're taking from Earth.
So they're not here to save us. It's more of a self-serving thing. They see us as a potential problem for their operations, especially if we start detonating nukes that could mess with whatever they're doing here.
Exactly. And in that scenario, our nuclear capabilities are a threat to them, something they need to control or get rid of.
That's a pretty scary thought. It's like we're ants in their ant farm, and they're not afraid to shake things up if we step out of line.
It's not a comforting image, but it's a possibility we need to think about. And remember, these theories aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. There could be multiple groups of non-human intelligence out there with different motives and goals. Some might be benevolent, while others are purely self-serving.
Okay, so we've got benevolent protectors, parasitic hosts, and everything in between. What are some other explanations for this UFO nuclear link?
Another interesting theory is the electromagnetic fallout theory. This one suggests that nuclear radiation somehow attracts or affects UFOs, maybe messing with their propulsion systems, or allowing them to appear in our reality.
So they're not intentionally drawn to nukes. They're just affected by them.
Right. The idea is that the high-energy environments around nuclear sites create anomalies that these objects are pulled towards, or that they can take advantage of.
This is getting really mind-bending. What other explanations are on the table?
Well, we can't talk about this without touching on the simulation theory.
The simulation theory. Okay, I'm all ears.
His theory says that our reality is actually a super advanced simulation, and these UFOs are either the creators or observers of this simulation. They're fascinated by our technological progress, especially with nukes, because it could mean we're getting close to breaking out of the simulation or messing with its programming.
Whoa, so we're like lab rats being watched by higher dimensional beings, and our nukes are like a glitch in the matrix.
It's a wild theory, but it's gained a lot of traction, especially as we learn more about quantum mechanics and the nature of reality.
I'm trying to keep an open mind here. Are there any more down-to-earth explanations?
There's the secret government technology theory. It argues that these UFOs aren't aliens at all, but really advanced top-secret aircraft developed by humans, probably through some black budget program. The reason they're seen around nuclear sites is because that's where these projects are being tested and deployed.
So it's not aliens, it's us. But why all the secrecy? Why not just reveal these technologies to the world?
That's the big question, isn't it? Some people who believe this theory think that these technologies are so advanced, so disruptive, that they could destabilize the whole world if they were made public. Others think these projects might involve unethical experiments or activities, things the government wants to keep under wraps.
Okay, so maybe not all of them are secret government projects. What about time travel? Could that be a factor?
Ah, time travel. Now we're really getting into mind-blowing territory. The time travel theory suggests that these UFOs might be remnants of a future time travel program, one that uses nuclear energy to power its technology.
So we could be seeing time travelers from our own future, and nuclear energy is the key to their technology.
It's a fascinating concept, right? And it kind of makes sense. Our understanding of time travel is still in its early stages, but some physicists believe that manipulating gravity, which is connected to time, could be the key to figuring it out. And what's the most powerful force we know of that can manipulate gravity? Nuclear energy.
So these time travelers might be using our nuclear sites as like
Yeah.
entry and exit points in the space-time continuum. It's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does sound far-fetched, but then again, so did a lot of the technologies we use every day, just a few decades ago.
Good point. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Benevolent protectors, parasitic hosts, electromagnetic fallout, simulations, secret government projects, even time travel. It's a lot to digest.
It is, and I think that's what makes this topic so fascinating. There are no easy answers, no clear-cut explanations. It's a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces, and it's up to each of us to weigh the evidence, consider the possibilities, and draw our own conclusions.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we've uncovered this really unsettling pattern of UFO activity around nuclear sites. We've heard from these credible witnesses, people whose stories would make anyone stop and think. And we've explored all these theories that, well, they really push the limits of what we thought we knew. It's a lot to take in, to be honest.
It is, and I think what we have to remember is that this isn't just some kind of, thought experiment. This phenomenon, whatever it has real consequences. It makes us question our assumptions about reality, about our place in the universe, and about what might happen because of the choices we make.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in all the theories and speculation. But we can't forget that we're talking about events that have a real impact. We've heard from witnesses who have been silenced, intimidated, even had their lives turned upside down because of what they saw. And if these UFOs really can mess with our nukes, that's a terrifying thought.
Absolutely. It raises some serious questions about our security, our sovereignty, our future as a species. If we're not even in control of our most powerful weapons, what does that say about our ability to deal with the challenges ahead?
It's a sobering thought. So what can we do? As individuals, as a society, how do we respond to this? It's easy to feel overwhelmed, even powerless, when you're faced with a mystery this big and complex.
I get that. But I think the first step is just admitting that this is real. We can't keep brushing it off as fantasy or some conspiracy theory. There's too much evidence. The implications are too big to ignore.
So we need to start taking this seriously. We need to have open and honest conversations about what's going on.
Exactly. We need to demand transparency from our governments. We need
Right.
to support the researchers who are trying to find out the truth. And maybe most importantly, we need to think critically. Don't just accept any one theory or explanation. Weigh the evidence, question your assumptions, and be open to having your beliefs challenged.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge, right? The more we understand about this, the better we'll be able to make decisions about our future.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And in this case, it could be the key to our survival. We need to figure out what we're dealing with, what the threats might be, and how we can protect ourselves.
So what can our listeners do? Where can they go to learn more, to get involved?
There are some great resources out there. The Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, is a good place to start. They have a huge database of sightings. They do investigations and put out regular reports. The Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, SCU, is another one doing great work. They're more focused on a scientific approach, analyzing data and coming up with testable theories.
And what about the government? Are there any official channels people can use to report sightings or get information?
That's where it gets a bit more difficult. The government has a long history of being secretive about UFOs, but there are a few things you can try. The National UFO Reporting Center, UFORCE, is a civilian organization that collects and looks at UFO reports, and they often share their info with government agencies. You can also file a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA, to try and get declassified documents about UFO sightings.
Good point. Even if the government isn't being upfront, there are ways to get them to cough up some information.
Exactly. And I think it's really important that we as citizens hold our governments accountable. We have a right to know what's happening, especially if it could be dangerous to us.
This has been an amazing deep dive. We've covered so much, from the history of UFO sightings near nuclear sites to all the mind-blowing theories about what it all means. This is a topic that deserves our attention, our curiosity, and our critical thinking.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the most important thing for our listeners to take away is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge the way things are. And most of all, don't be afraid to believe in the possibility of something truly extraordinary.
We've really only scratched the surface of this mystery, but hopefully this deep dive has given you the tools and the interest to keep exploring. Keep digging, keep questioning, and keep an open mind.
Because as we've seen today, the truth is out there, and it just might be stranger than we can even imagine, and it could change everything.
And with that, we'll leave you with one final thought-provoking question. If these UFOs have been watching us for decades, seeing our technology advance, witnessing our successes and our failures, what do you think their message to humanity would be?